Hello, everybody. This is Neil Mayerson, and welcome to the session number 2. As excuse me, I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I have a bit of a cold that I caught. As Ryan Nemec mentioned to you, he covered session number 1 of this course as I was in Japan doing some training with folks who are applying VIA into businesses and helping businesses become better at what they do through the use of character strengths. And somewhere along the ways I caught a cold, and so unfortunately I will be maybe sniffing and coughing from time to time, and I apologize ahead of time for that, and we'll try to keep that to a minimum. I want to thank all of you for your interest and for attending this class, and I look forward to covering the rest of the content with you, and hopefully so that as you emerge from this class you will begin to understand how character strengths can relate to improving engagement, performance, and satisfaction in the workplace and in building teams. So let's get started just by recapping session number 1, in which we talked about, or we reviewed some of the information that tells us that effective teams are characterized by high levels of engagement, high levels of interactivity among its members, how character strengths themselves are pathways for employees to become engaged and around which they can become interactive, and that work offers an opportunity for self-expression, and it becomes a place where one can feel valued and accepted by coworkers and supervisors. And thirdly, that talents, separate from character strengths, talents are a set of strengths that we all have, and that we can express them in ways that we can connect our character strengths to, or talents are vehicles by which we can express who we are, and that making the connection at work with both our strengths of talent and our strengths of character can become very important. And then finally, kind of the overarching concept that in this day and age of global competition and economic challenges, it's probably more than ever before essential for companies to be considering the human factors as they are trying to compete in the workplace and to become effective and successful, and to really try to get the most out of the people that they have on board. Obviously, many companies are trying to get more done with fewer people, and the way to do that is to try to ensure that you are getting the most from the people that you do have on board. And we think that whereas in the past maybe when things were less tight, people could succeed based on talent itself and based on resources, and there was a little more room to not be quite as efficient with one's human resources. But now the requirement really is to try to optimize, maximize the efficiency of human resources by getting the most from each and every employee, and that is done by really giving good consideration to what you might call the human factors, the recognition that employees are human beings, and therefore there are things about their psychology, the things that make us tick, that we can consider and try that allow us to improve engagement and motivation. Now, the model for working with character strengths and teams that we are putting forward is one that we call the AAA model. Obviously, each A stands for something itself. The first A has to do with awareness. Now, this is a model that we're suggesting as consultants that you just keep in mind as kind of 3 steps of what you're trying to accomplish as you consult with people, and what people need to, the steps that people need to go through in order to integrate character strengths into their work, in their teamwork. And first and foremost, of course, is to develop some awareness of what are your character strengths as an employee. The second A has to do with alignment, which is, once you're aware of what your character strengths are, how can you connect them with what you're doing at work? And then the third A has to do with appreciation, which is how do you use character strengths, yours and those of your coworkers, to make connections with each other. So the idea is, what are my character strengths? What are the character strengths of the people I work with? How do I use that knowledge to connect with what I do and with the people with whom I am doing my work? So that's the general model that we want you to keep in mind as you're thinking of working with clients. Building awareness, helping them find places for alignment or connecting their character strengths with what they're doing, and finding a way for them to make connections with one another at the level of character strengths. For those of you who are wanting to get CEU credit, the first code word for this course, we'll be giving 2 of them, but the first code word is the word dance, so please take note of that. Now let's go to that first step of awareness. This chart you saw in the last session. It's a snapshot. It's offered in the team report. I want to remind everybody, some of you have in fact ordered team reports, and those are available to all of you based on, as one of the benefits of this course, you get 1 complimentary team report. And so to take advantage of this, what you need to do is simply email Kelly Aloise, whose email is kellya@viacharacter.org, and email her the number of people that are on your team, and she will then add those credits to your account, and you'll be able to get a team report as part of your participation in this course. And this is one of the tables from that team report, which is kind of the at-a-glance table where you can see the team members. This team has 5 members on it. And you can kind of, at a glance, all the dots represent their top strengths as identified by their via survey. And by looking at this, you can kind of quickly look through the vertical columns and see who has which top strengths. You can kind of look through horizontally at the level of the virtues and see, how the team, how many dots really are represented in each of the virtue categories, to see where there might be more or less balance. And so this, we find this as kind of a good snapshot, and some supervisors and also team members themselves find this can find this useful, just to keep this this at-a-glance table right at hand in terms of maintaining awareness of the team and where the character strengths are. You can kind of see that, I can kind of see that this team has pretty good representation across all of the virtue categories. and have many of the character strengths are represented by by somebody having one of the top strengths. And so this looks like a very well-balanced team when I look at this at-a-glance report. Now, there are a couple distinct advantages of looking at character strengths, not individually as we do when we're just looking at the VIA Pro report, but when we look at individuals' strengths in the context of others, of their group. Because two things emerge in general. The one view is what strengths that are held in common, and that starts to define a culture, and the other thing that starts to become apparent are any strengths that different team members tend to possess uniquely among their peers. So let's focus first on the issue of culture. And so when many team members hold the same character strength in common as one of their top strengths, it starts to have an influence over the group. It's a common thread that runs through the group in terms of what turns people on, what motivates people, what people value. And the culture determines what behaviors will be most and least encouraged in the group. It can tell us what the glue is that kind of is holding everybody together, what activities provide, get people pumped up and are energy-giving activities as opposed to energy-draining activities. It starts to give a clue so where you should look in terms of every group you want to be concerned about in-grouping and out-grouping. Are there people who are feeling on the outskirts? They're not feeling part of the main group. They're feeling kind of on the sidelines, and which of course you don't want that to happen, because those people are not going to feel most motivated and are not going to be most productive. You want everybody to feel like they're part of the same team. Everybody has an important role to play. Everybody's depending on one another to develop the team's potential. So by looking at the cultural norms, the cultural character strengths, you can start to know where to look for in-grouping and out-grouping, and to check that out. You can also start to see where might there be functional vulnerabilities. So just as an extreme example, if you have a team where everybody has everybody shares creativity as a top strength, and very few people have strengths that have to do with getting things done, like perseverance, persistence, self-regulation, then that team might be vulnerable for tending to generate lots of ideas but not getting anything done. So it gives you an idea of where to start to look for functional vulnerabilities in the team, and most importantly, it starts to look at where does the team shine, because that'll give you ideas of what to celebrate, because you definitely need a good team celebrate what they do well. Here's a more detailed table from the team report that looks at this issue of culture. You can see that in the left-hand column are the list of character strengths. In the middle column is the percentage of what percentage of people on the team have this as a top strength. And then to the right, you have the average raw score across all of the team members. So as an example here, we have perspective. All of the team members have that as a top character strength. And if you took each person's perspective score, averaged them, it would come out to 4.4. And so here you can see that perspective and judgment certainly are very strong cultural influences, and love, perseverance, social intelligence are also pretty strong, where more than a majority, 60% of the people have it as a top strength, and they have very high raw scores. Remember, the raw scores range from 1 to 5, 5 being the very highest score. So scores of 4.4, 4.3, 4.5, as we see here, are very high scores. So this team, you can look at those qualities: perspective, judgment, love, perseverance, social intelligence, seem to be very high cultural norms in this team. Two of them represent the wisdom category, 2 represent humanity, and 1 the courage. And so it starts to give you a picture, and this is something that it would tell you this seems to be kind of a smart and a humane team, and it's a culture that values smart decision making, it values hard work, and it values passionate caring for other people. There are 15 character strengths here that have a score of 4.0 or higher, which says overall this is a pretty strong team. It's likely to be an animated team and engaged in general. And when you look at the ZEST score itself, which we know is kind of it's an energy-giving character strength. And when Ryan talked about the Human Performance Institute at MIT and some of their findings and how important this active interrelating, which is kind of reflected in ZEST, I like to look at ZEST scores. And even though only 20% had it as a top score, nonetheless, it had a high raw score, 4.3. So it seems like this is a team that does have good energy infused in it and is likely to be a pretty satisfied team as well. Now, you can also, from this table, look at the low scores, and there are 7 or so here that actually have 0% of the people who have this as a top strength. Now, a caveat here I always want to point out is, remember that the VIA survey identifies 4 to 7, based on its algorithm, only 4 to 7 top strengths. And our research suggests that we know that most people actually have more than 4 to 7 strengths that they consider to be signature, that meet the criteria for being signature. And so we always need to consider these data reports from the VIA survey as a very conservative representation of top character strengths and of signature strengths. So with that being said, that caveat, here we look at these low scores in terms of these 0 percentages, and we of course want to think, well, are these areas of concern, or to what degree should we be concerned about any of these? And the first thing that I like to do is look to the right-hand column and just see what's the raw score here. And certainly for raw scores that are around 4 or higher, I'm really not very concerned about, again, because those are pretty high scores on the scale. And then you have, let's say, the lowest raw score is one of humility. And so the question is, do we have an issue here of a bunch of egos clashing? And in this team, I actually, know this team well, and it's they actually don't have this ego clashing problem, because they actually do have a habit of giving each other credit and doing a good job of that. Now, if they didn't, it could be an issue of having that each individual doesn't really have enough humility and might tend to try to take the spotlight a lot and be the one who claims successes, and in so doing would feel like might denigrate the contributions of others, which wouldn't feel very good to the other people. And then you have love of learning here at 3.7, but then I see that their curiosity score is high, and with this team I happen to know that their curiosity causes them to want to know certain things. Their love of learning isn't particularly strong with any of them, and what this team actually does is they will tend to contract with outside people to do white papers and research and to actually do the learning part of the areas in which they are in fact curious. And so they manage to deal with it that way. But this graph starts to give you an idea of the kinds of places where the kinds of behaviors that the culture is going to support and encourage, and some of the areas of vulnerability to look for, and how to analyze them. Now, the team report offers a variety of perspectives, and in fact, perspective is a very important point, we think, in terms of understanding the work of VIA, because what happens is the VIA's contribution has largely been the introduction of a new language, this language of strengths, which becomes a new set of lenses through which we can view the world. And when we view the world in the context of this class, the work world, when we view ourselves and our colleagues and the workplace through these lenses, we tend to gain particular insights and see things that we might not otherwise see. In this slide here, we have we depict a sculpture by a Italian artist named Guido Moretti, and it's called The Cube. Now, most of you, I'm sure when you look at it, it looks like three sculptures, but the reality is, and I wish I had the technology to be able to show you the video that I have on this, because you would see it. Now I have to just ask you to believe me, is that this is all one sculpture. So if you look at the middle, it looks like a cube that's balanced on a point, and which in and of itself would be kind of curious and miraculous as to how it would be balanced on that point. You would think that there might be some trick to it being affixed with a nail or some sort of trick, glue or something. But in fact, if you would walk around this cube, what would start to emerge would be these different perspectives. The one you see on the left, if you walked to the left of it, and this perspective on the right if you walk to the right of it, which is kind of miraculous. It's almost unbelievable, really, that, but it points out to us, and the reason we include this here is it makes the point that when you look at things from different perspectives, you often discover different insights and things look very different. And that's what we find happens when people look at the workplace through the VIA character strength lenses. And that's why we offer a variety of perspectives for looking at culture. So in the team report, one perspective we offer is this virtues perspective. Remember, the virtues are the 6 categories of wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence, that around which the VIA classification is categorized, and the 24 strengths are nested within each of these 6 categories. And so on this graph, if everybody was, if this was a completely balanced team, all of these numbers would be about 17%. And so variations above and beyond 17% start to define how the team is balanced or imbalanced. Here you can see the 2 extremes here. are that it is highly balanced in terms of humanity, and it is most imbalanced and least represented in terms of the category of the strengths of temperance, things that where we manage our impulses and things that allow us to find points of moderation. So again, this is a team I know very well. It's one that works for me, and this is it's a caring team that cares very much to do well by others, as reflected in its strong humanity representation. It's smart. It has smart people in it. It has smart thinking, which is represented in the wisdom category of 20%. And in terms of temperance, the question is, well, you know, are they a reckless group? Are they a group that tends to do things impulsively? How do they rein themselves in? How do they find moderation? And in this group, and as it occurs oftentimes with many teams, you have to remember that the team oftentimes is part of a larger organization, and the other parts of the organization might provide functions that aren't within the team. In this team per se, there are forces around them in the company that so they come up with ideas and they want to move forward with something, but they have to get it approved at another level in the company, and that's where the temperance and moderation comes in to help out where this team on its own might struggle some. Then if we move kind of higher up in perspective, if that might make sense, we have what we call here a two-factor model, or one which Chris Peterson initially introduced and called it a circumplex model. And basically what it does is, through the statistical procedure of factor analysis, what it does is it starts to be able to break down each strength to, if you think of each strength having 4 ingredients, an ingredient that represents the degree to which it, the word we use here is heart, and that kind of, to what degree does it have emotional and affective components to it? The mind, to what degree does this character strength express itself largely in the mind and through thinking, cognitive processes? To what extent does this character strength get expressed in the context of relationships, which is the interpersonal label? And to what extent does this character strength get expressed, can it be expressed outside of the context of other people? And that's the intrapersonal label. And so through this statistical analysis, we can look at each character strength and see how much of these 4 ingredients does the character strength have. And so, for example, we find that humor is 63% heart, 7% mind. It's 11% intrapersonal, and 19% interpersonal. So so we can look at each person's top scores, and here we see, for instance, Tom, and we can look at his top scores, clump them all together, and get a heart score, a mind score, an interpersonal score, and an intrapersonal score. And we can see that for Tom, his top strengths, as identified by the survey, are represented a little more heart than mind, 55 versus 45, and considerably more relationship-oriented, interpersonal, than intrapersonal. And so on. You can go down through the team members and see how each falls out that way. And then at the bottom, across all of the team members, is the team average. And here you can see there's a team that is balanced more towards the heart than the mind in terms of their top character strengths, and they're balanced more with character strains that can be expressed outside the context of others. And this is a team that I had worked with in the past, and in fact it was a team that did not work in a larger organization, so it was it was the sum total. It had to rely on the strengths that it had to work with. Now what happened to this team is they were great in terms of getting along with one another. They were smart. They sincerely tried hard. But they were, in terms of being connected with the marketplace, what other people needed from them and wanted from them in terms of product, they were a bit out of touch. And what happened was they came up with things that were theoretically good, but practically just didn't work very well. They were balanced more towards an academic and humanistic caring approach, but that eventually caused them to fail, actually, because they were a little too out of touch or out of step with the marketplace, as reflected by their interpersonal, intrapersonal balance there. And unfortunately, they didn't have other forces to help balance that out and correct it, and so as a result, this team actually failed. We have another display in the team report of this two-factor model, and it displays it along the two dimensions. The one dimension, the vertical one, being heart and mind, and the horizontal dimension being interpersonal, intrapersonal. And the quadrants there are labeled 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what you see is the initials of the team members displayed in each quadrant. So you can start to see how this team balances out in just a very visual, graphic way. So you can see that in quadrant 4, the intrapersonal / heart quadrant is where most of the balance is. The least balance is in quadrant 3, the interpersonal / mind quadrant. And then you have some representation in the other two. And again, this is by giving a bird's eye view of this team and its balance, and becomes a point for discussion. I should mention that in the team report, in each of these sections, with each of the tables and graphs, there's a section on questions and areas of exploration to help you think of what kind of questions to explore. How can these data help the team think through certain kinds of issues and arrive at certain kinds of insights? Another view we have in terms of this the group's culture is from the point of view of work-life satisfaction strengths. So the strengths you see listed here, hope, gratitude, zest, love, and curiosity, are strengths that time and again in various studies have been shown to be the ones that pop to the top among the 24 as to their relationship with life satisfaction and work satisfaction. And so that's why we highlight them, just to take a look at these in particular and see how the team is doing in terms of these work-life satisfaction strengths. Here on this graph, what we see is that each of these work-life satisfaction strengths have some representation by a team member, which in and of itself would suggest that the team overall would have would function at a high level of satisfaction. You also see on the right-hand side in the average raw score that all of the raw scores are at 4 or higher, which supports that idea that this team should be kind of a happy, high-functioning team. Now, if in fact as you explore that you find out that that is not true, it becomes a very curious finding and one that needs exploration. if you find out that the team is a pretty high-functioning and satisfied team, then these findings help them understand why that might be true. So that's a quick look at character culture, the strengths that are held in common by the team members as top strengths, and how the data can reveal different insights and questions for exploration excuse me, to improve activation and connection of the character strengths. Now, to get to the next unique part of this team report, the part that I mentioned that we can start to get a picture of the unique strengths that people bring to the table, ones that are not highly shared by others. I like to frame this part of the discussion or this part of the report in terms of just remembering for some of us, or understanding that a team functions as kind of like it does a dance, what we call a dance. The slide's called the dance of a team, and that like two people dancing together, there's an issue of following and leading in a very fluid and dynamic way. Two processes, one we call stepping up, which is when you have something unique to contribute, that you need to recognize it, your team members need to recognize it, and it's an opportunity for you to step forward and make your contribution. And when it's time for somebody else to be able to make a contribution, it's important for people to know to make room for those people to make their contributions. And so it's a process, and so for this team dance to work well and not have people stepping on each other's toes all the time, it requires that each person understand what they might be able to bring to the table uniquely and what others can bring to the table uniquely, so that everybody has kind of a general awareness, at least, that at different points along the way, it's time for me to step forward. It's time for me to make room for someone else to step forward. So, as an example, in a conversation, a team meeting, it might start with a conversation in which there's brainstorming, and we're trying to come up with ideas about something or how to deal with something, and it might really be a time when folks with creativity or people with social intelligence or whatever might really have a particular relevance at that point in the conversation. And then after a point of time, there might be a lot of conversation, a lot of ideas thrown out on the table, and it might be a point at which somebody with good critical thinking or judgment skills might want to kind of take the lead, and then somebody with perspective, somebody who kind of gets the big picture, can start to pull together all the disparate things that have been spoken about and thrown out on the table and start to summarize and define kind of the common thread of where are we at with this conversation now. And then and then towards the end of a group of a meeting, people with character strengths such as perspective or prudence. People with prudence are people who tend to be planners. They like to know what are the next steps, where are we going from here. And it's good to end meetings oftentimes with somebody summarizing, here's what we talked about today, here's where we're going, here's what our action plan is based on what we talked about today, here's what our next step is leading into the next meeting we're going to have. And so there's a different role at different points in the conversation for people to step forward, and that's the idea of conditional leadership as opposed to positional leadership, or sometimes it's called situational leadership or dispersed leadership, whatever. The concept is we're most familiar with the idea of positional leadership, that there are people in an organization who their job title and their role is that they're supposed to pull people together and give them direction and lead people towards a goal. The more micro when you put that under a microscope and really see how does this work get done, it really gets done because at different points people are stepping up and taking leadership roles based on their talents and their character strengths being relevant at that moment. And so the dynamics of leadership are that everybody, most everybody, has a point in time in which it's their time to be the leader of the group, even if it's just for moments. But those are critical moments that help the group transition from where it was to where it's going to be. And so the idea then that the positional leader's role really is to help pull out and find the opportunities for all of the team members to express their unique strengths in the form of which we think of as kind of helping each team member find their own leadership opportunities in the dynamics of the group process and to express them so that everybody understands that at times they lead, and therefore the reason why a group ends up anywhere is because everybody has made a contribution that has helped pull the group forward towards the point at which it succeeds. I also like to use the example of a basketball team in which you have 5 people out on the basketball floor, and it's good to know who do we look to if we're trying to run out time and we need somebody to just dribble around and run the clock out. We need to know who's the dribbler and who to get the ball to, and if we need somebody to make a jump shot, we need to know that. If we need to know somebody who we need to get somebody to the foul line to make a foul shot and win the game, we know who to get the ball to then. So it's very important to as much, or probably even more so, that, or I'd say equally as important as understanding your own strengths and what you have to contribute, is understanding what your team members have to contribute, and that way you will be able to make room for them when it's their time to make a contribution. So with that being said, is the frame for understanding why all this understanding unique character strengths is so important. We have this table from the team report. I think it's on page 18 of the of the sample report. And here we have a team with 5 members, and we can see that Joe has creativity and humor uniquely among his group. Sam uniquely has prudence. Other people do not have that identified as one of their top strengths. Nikki, has perspective as one of her top strengths, and she, uniquely among the whole group, has that as her strength. So the question really becomes, once you see this this table, is really exploring with the team, are these in fact unique to you? Do other people see them as unique? Do other people look to you, Sam, as being the one who's going to have the level head here and who's going to be remind us of what to be cautious about and to proceed prudently? Pam, are people really, are you the person who people really look to when they're wondering about things, or to help the group wonder about new possibilities, etc., etc.? So that's the purpose of this table. One note is that in our team report, we introduced the concept and of what we call an integrator. There are some people who have no strengths uniquely, which means that all of their top strengths are ones that are shared pretty commonly with others. Oftentimes these people are people who are very well connected to everybody, and they serve as kind of a glue in the team. Somehow they function in a way that holds everybody together, and when there are problems, they tend to be the person who people tend to express it to, and they know they have a lot of insights into the team dynamics and the undercurrents that are going on in a team, and they often play the role of helping manage the whole team to function well, and therefore we call them integrators. Now, oftentimes people talk about, and we do too, talk about character strengths as individual character strengths, and as if they are expressed individually. But in reality, character strengths are not expressed individually. They're almost always expressed with other character strengths. And so they're in some sorts of combinations. And so a concept that we find helpful to ask people to think about is, when they look at their top character strengths, is to start to think of what other character strengths do they oftentimes combine with those top strengths, because that starts to define what you could call their special sauce. What is the special sauce that they really bring to the table? So as an example, you can have two people, one person, each of them with creativity as a top strength. One of them who might commonly pair their creativity with judgment, critical thinking, and another person who might commonly pair their creativity with appreciation of beauty and excellence. Those two people will serve different functions on a team. Their special sauce is different. It tastes different. It adds something different to the ingredients. With the first person, likely to be somebody who's going to be helping in strategic visioning, strategic decisions, and the other person being somebody who would be, for instance, very helpful in developing a advertisement, a company brochure, things like that, where they'll use their creativity to create something that has beauty and excellence in it. The other person creating things that have to do with really applying critical thinking and judgment. So we ask each person to start to think about, what's your special sauce? Look at your unique strengths, and then think of, what do you oftentimes combine them with? And that might define your special sauce. And then each person can start to understand what their special sauce is. Okay. Now here's another concept that is, we find, can be a very, very, very powerful one in applying character strengths, and that has to do with the idea that character strengths are qualities that we have that are very important to us, and they have a strong, especially our signature strengths, have a strong momentum. They tend to have be strongly expressed by us, and so we tend to lead with them in situations. And sometimes we have two people who are leading with their character strengths, and their character strengths collide with one another, and it creates conflict. You see, each of our character strengths, it just kind of turns out this way, that if I have creativity as a top character strength, I tend to assume or to think other people should also have creativity as a top character strength. If and be aggravated and irritated when they don't. If I have fairness as the top character strength, it's something that's very, very important to me, and somebody else doesn't, I will tend to, it will be a hot button for me. It'll be something that when I see somebody not being particularly fair or not being treated fairly by someone else, it'll irk me, and it'll tend to evoke a hot emotion in me, and then those become points of conflict. And oftentimes, if the people understand the sources, that those sources of their potential conflict actually are deriving from character strengths, that they can in advance plan a way of dealing with that creates what we call a planned synergy, so that the result is something stronger as opposed to something that is a degraded product. So for example, two people working together who do presentations, let's say sales presentations, and the one person has a top strength of love of learning, the other person, let's say, has a top strength of perspective. The person, if they don't recognize that and acknowledge that with one another and have no planning around that, what might happen is the person who has love of learning is going to do a presentation in which they assume everybody else has a love of learning and wants to know all the details about everything that they've acquired knowledge about, and have a very detailed presentation conveying lots and lots of knowledge. The person with perspective will be sitting on the sidelines getting more and more irritated, feeling like that the person is losing the forest for the trees, or in other words, not helping the audience get the big picture, and kind of drowning them in details, and then we'll start to try to cut off the other person, interrupt the other person, and then provide perspective, and then as a result, the two people have conflict with one another afterwards. Commonly, unfortunately, what happens is they don't talk about it, they never work it through, they're irritated with one another, and that becomes a subtext for their future working together. Alternatively, they could talk together ahead of time, recognize these good qualities that they each have, that one loves learning a lot, another really values perspective, and figure out a way to deal with that ahead of time, so that at the end, what they do is they convey a good amount of information, they keep a good perspective, and people feel like they get a very, very strong presentation. So that's an example of how viewing activity in the workplace can help avoid what oftentimes is just a very destructive thing in the workplace, which are collisions, undercurrents of tension, aggravation with one another, and to turn these instead on their ends and create them and have them become strengths and become planned synergies is a great opportunity. Now, another in terms of the AAA model, the second area has to do with alignment, and an area that VIA has started to explore is how people can connect their character strengths with the tasks that they actually do at work. You see, people can connect their character strengths basically at 3 different levels at the workplace. They can connect with kind of the overall mission and with purpose, and what is this company doing, and how do my character strengths relate to that. They can relate to other people, the people they work with in terms of their character strengths, and they can also connect with the things that they're doing, the actual tasks that they're doing, and with their character strengths. And as long as somewhere in those 3 areas they're connecting with their top talents and their top character strengths, it's going to be very strong. That person will be in their power zone. So you're trying to find, it's not necessary that somebody connect at all 3 levels with their character strengths and all 3 levels with their talents, but they connect somewhere strongly with their character strengths and some were strongly with their talents. And so what we offer in the team report is something that is exploratory for us, which is identifying these 7 functions that are common with teams, and there are certain activities that go along with each of these functions. And then what we've done is we pulled together kind of an expert panel who understood character strengths very well and asked them how they thought the character strengths might apply to each of these different functions, and asked them which ones would be, of all of them, most kind of primarily important in terms of generating ideas or gathering information or making decisions, etc., and which ones might not be the primary ones but might be supportive. And then we kind of map that out as a way of helping people to start that process of exploration and exploring how character strengths might apply to things that people are doing and where they might make connections. And that mapping out is on page 23 of the sample report. And again, it's very exploratory. This hasn't been empirically verified yet, but people find it interesting. And we encourage people, if you have different ideas of your team functions or different ways of categorizing and mapping this all out, that's fine. The important thing is just to begin generating some thinking about what is it that I do and how do my character strengths relate to that. I have one very quick example of that. I was talking to a compliance officer at a company, and her role is setting rules and making sure everybody abides by the rules. And her top character strength is love. And I asked her, what does love have to do with what you do? And she said, well, it's the way I bring my soul and my caring to work, because the reason I want people to abide by the rules, she was in a healthcare setting and she was trying to get the healthcare professionals to abide by the rules so they didn't get in trouble. And because she cared so much about them as people and about the work they did with their patients, that she connected love with the tasks of getting people to abide by rules. So that's an example. Here's a report that the team report offers. The P's stand for primary, the S's stand for excuse me, supportive. And so here what you can see is Joe, as an example, has 2 of his top character strengths that are primary character strengths in terms of generating ideas. One of his top strengths falls into the category of being primary for managing information, etc. You see 1, and then the S's are ones that are supportive, and to the far right you see the summary of all of that, where he has 8 primary and 6 supportive. And you can kind of look at that and you can see, for instance, here Pam has the most by far character strengths that apply to the various functions, and you would think therefore that Pam was a strong leader in this group, and you would look to see if that was true and was verified. If it wasn't, then it would look like you have somebody in Pam who has a lot of potential for leadership who is not getting the opportunity to express it. If she is, she seems to be rightfully placed in that role. And then at the bottom of that is you have RAL, who is at the lower end compared to his teammates, in terms of only having 2 primary and 3, and you would wonder, are you feeling like you make an important contribution? Do you feel valued in this group? The second code word for those who are wanting credit is together. The second code word for getting CEU credits is the word together. Now, as you all do your Skype calls, I would like to suggest a topic that you talk about, even though I know from experience that you will in fact talk about whatever you find most interesting, which is great. For those of you who are maybe wanting some direction, I think it could be a very interesting discussion to have in terms of trying to describe a strength collision that you've experienced personally or you have observed others having, and how that might convert into a planned synergy. And you might do that together, or you might each share your own examples of that. I encourage you all to take advantage of your groups and the different perspectives and experiences you all have by participating in your Skype group. And again, I want to thank you all for your interest in taking this course and helping VIA explore and start to move into the directions of applying the underlying research and science of character strengths into the workplace in terms of how it can help people feel more connected and satisfied with their work, and help the work teams and their employers succeed at higher rates. So thanks so much for your participation, and I hope you have great Skype group conversations, and I look forward to talking with you again next week. Take care.